Welcome to Athens City Council. Tonight is Monday, May 1st, 2006. This evening, City Council is meeting in regular session. We do have a quorum with all members of council present. Communications. Law Director Hunter. Your report. Mayor Abel. All of you wants to talk to us tonight.
Council may have noticed in the media there were reports. Remember, I came to a committee meeting some months ago and said that we needed to look at replacing some communications equipment in the police department. And I rough estimated that around $80,000 or so. Since then, we pursued Homeland Security monies through the county and also 911 communication numbers. The county had approved $50,000 to do the first main site equipment and repeater, and one what they call voter or relay type system, and would analyze after those were installed to see if for the communication study we did, we might need up to 3 other sites. So anyway, that grant was awarded. If we want to look at it that way, the bids were opened last week, and so we're proceeding with a replacement of that equipment through alternate funds rather than city funds. But it brought up the question for council to maybe consider at your next committee if the president would sign it out. One of the other problems we have is when the officer is on a handheld unit, they're sometimes within a building, they can't get out communication wise to the squad car, etc. And we have a few of those identified. Of course, it's more noticeable, like if you're in a basement area, etc. But if you're not, and what we're thinking of primarily is on new construction, because if you get out there, say, well, let's say we got Hampton Inn being built right now, what would happen if a police officer gets called out there, goes in, and it doesn't have communications because of being blocked by something within the structure? And one of the ways to do that is once you do the inspections of a building prior to occupancy, you test it for that, and then you have a change in your code requirements that if they don't, then they would be required to put at their expense something on the building that would solve that problem, otherwise a small repeater station, etc. So something for council to consider, because there are times that that could occur, and we don't obviously want that, because usually police are responding to some type of call for service. That was the only item I had, unless some council members have questions on something.
Mayor, I was wondering, this is more prosaic than yours, but it has to do with soccer fields. And when we were on the street tour, we went by the Highland Park because several of my constituents were pretty concerned about the lack of playing space. And I asked Ron Lucas if it was possible that we could put one there temporarily. But there's the bigger question. The soccer moms and dads amongst us that are in my ward are concerned about taking multi-purpose land and changing it over, all for a good purpose, but they feel there's a lack of space, and maybe we could talk about that next time we have a meeting. And lack of space for the soccer team or the soccer activities.
Right. The long-range plan on that is to create 4 fields down in behind Staples. We've leased for $1 the land from the Conservancy District. We put in the water lines over to there this spring so that we could water the fields in case. That's what happened last year. We grass seeded and planted for one, and then it had a long dry spell and the grass did not mature properly. So that's why we've done that. And within the Recreation Department budget was a capital line item. I think we budgeted up to $30,000 of capital for it. The request was to level that and seed it. That I okayed earlier this week or last week was about $21,000. So, but we're still a year to a year and a half away to that being a solution. Meanwhile, we're trying to work with the softball or baseball, little league type organization to say you can't have it every night. We had told them that in writing and verbally, but they started to schedule too much, especially their practices. It's got to be a shared use field at least for another 1 to 2 years, and we've made that clear to them. So we're trying to address it.
Yeah, there's some unhappy parents out there. It would be good for them to hear what you had to say.
That's true. There are
You've heard it too.
I know you attended the Beautification Day event, and I want to thank the polo team for doing all that stuff. I asked them if possible to give us a little feedback. I don't know if we'll get it or you'll get it. Mostly the idea of how long it took to do things and what their strengths and weaknesses are for the next time around.
Right.
So if you get a copy or some kind of report, let us
I'll
know.
get it to you.
Okay.
Other questions for the mayor? Thank you. City Auditor Kathy Heck.
Well, I was just going to point out that our income tax report for April is good. This is the first month so far this year that we've been up 0.7%, which amounts to about $21,000 over last year. So hopefully that trend will continue through the rest of this year.
Very good news. I jumped across an item on our agenda, disposition of minutes. Do I have a motion to accept the regular minutes from council session held April 17th? Further discussion? All those in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes have been accepted. Were there other communications that any members of council wish to share? I believe I am in receipt of any. Oh, I'm sorry, I guess I am, that the clerk has given me. On regular session, May 15th, at 7, or just before regular session of May 15th, at 7:15 p.m., we will have the CDBG public hearing. I should wear these all the time. Ordinances for third reading. O3106, an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 11, Chapter 11.05, licenses, and Chapter 11.08, taxi cabs. Member Patterson.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt O3106.
Second.
This is the update of the ordinance that controls the taxi service in Athens. It's been a long process. The taxi company owners have been involved, code office has been involved, other city staff, city council, and assorted individuals in the community. And so I just would like to thank all of those people for working together on it. And we've discussed it a lot and amended it at one point. And in my opinion, we're ready for a vote.
Is there further discussion on ordinance 3106? Member Weil.
Thanks, Carol, for doing a lot of the work. A lot.
Other comments? All those in favor of adoption of the ordinance?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Thank you.
3106 has been adopted. Ordinance 3906, an ordinance granting a variance from the Athens City Subdivision Regulations for property located on Carroll Road, owned by Barney and Carol Gruser, to allow a minor lot split. Member Phillips.
Mr. President, I move adoption of O3906. Second. This ordinance grants a variance. The variance will permit the lots to exist. They don't meet the 3-to-1 lot depth ratio. They are consistent with other lots in the immediate area.
Further comments? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 3906?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 4106, an ordinance amending ordinance O8204, establishing a fee schedule for solid waste and recycling, Title 5 of the Athens City Code, introduced by all members of council. Member Weil?
I move adoption of O4106.
Second.
This is a rate increase for our garbage hauling. It affects the 2 30-gallon containers plus rates, going from $9.50 for a 2-gallon to 2-gallon containers to $10. It's a 50 cents increase on all levels. The intent of this is to actually help offset payments for a litter control officer. We might have to revisit this as the contracts for solid waste come up again, I suspect. And this is the cost of litter.
Further comments? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 4106?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 4206, an ordinance amending ordinance O-12605, Exhibit A, authorizing staffing levels, and Exhibit C, non-union pay scale. Again, introduced by all members of council. Member Sands, I believe, who looks quizzically. Who wishes to speak to this? Member Weil.
I move adoption of 4206.
Second.
This is to add a litter control officer, full-time officer. We've discussed at times what the duties would be, but most of it would be to enforce the litter laws we have on the books right now.
Other comments? Member Bain.
In addition to that, I think you could add that Ray gave us some general description, gave the job description that he was hoping would be developed from this particular position, specifically helping him sort out some of the more thorny problems he has in the close-in neighborhoods with respect to billing. So I think overall it's probably a pretty good move. It was on his recommendation.
Very good. Other comments? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 4206?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 4306, an ordinance amending the 2006 appropriation ordinance. Member Sands.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance 4306.
Second.
This ordinance actually asked for approval of two appropriations. One is $20,000 to the garbage fund. This would pay for purchase of some recycling bins. During the discussion about the waste fees and the litter control person, Member Weil also brought up the idea that it's time to replenish the supply of recycling bins in the city, and so this will allow the city to purchase a large number of them.
About a half truck full.
About a half a truckload,
Yeah.
okay, and make them available to the public. The other part of this is an appropriation of $2,800 to the general fund. This is to help pay for some training in the treasurer's office. They've gotten some new computers, software systems, I believe, and this would allow for training courses.
Member Weil.
The amount we're expected to purchase in terms of recycling bins would be about $2,400.
Thank you.
Are there other comments about ordinance 43? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 4306?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Now ordinances for second reading. O-3706, an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 9, General Regulations, Chapter 9.13, Clean Indoor Air. Again, introduced by all members of council. Ordinance 4506, an ordinance authorizing street paving and repairs. Ordinance 4606, an ordinance authorizing engineering of the East State Street bike path extension from Cook Drive towards Stroud's Run Drive. Ordinance 4906, an ordinance amending the 2006 appropriation ordinance. Ordinance 5006, an ordinance providing for the issuance of $435,000 of water system revenue notes, 9th 2006 renewal by the City of Athens, Ohio, for the purpose of paying litigation costs and renewing notes previously issued for the purpose and declaring an emergency. Ordinances for first reading. O-5106, an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 5, Public Utilities, Section 5.03, Water Regulations, Section 5.03.01, Responsibility of Property Owner. Member Bain.
Well, Mr. President, first I'd like to amend O-5106 to not delete the Part B. That's a critical part of our ordinance.
Second.
To not delete their page.
To leave that where it is. actually, where more than one occupant or tenant is served through one meter, the property owner will be held directly responsible for the payment of all bills pertaining to the use of the water. I guess I thought we were only going to amend it by striking out the first
Part A.
part. Yeah, Part A. So Part B must be an accident or something. So,
Okay. We have a motion and second.
well, Paul's got some, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I second this actually, but I'm looking at this, isn't this redundant? I mean, if we're going to
Yes.
be, but you want that in anyway.
Well, I'm going to try, I probably will substitute next week. Because I handed it in and I wanted to go with the simpler first one that we had. And this is the more complex second one, which brings together things that are another part of the code.
Okay,
And I always like fewer words rather than more words would be my choice, fewer words.
okay.
And so, but I'd like to talk to Ray first. Okay, Mr. President, did we vote?
No, we haven't yet.
Okay.
Is there further discussion on the amendment only? Member Patterson?
So you do or you don't think it says the same thing?
I think it says more than we were talking about last week than the one I handed you. So,
Well, what I mean is the capitalized highlighted area.
mm-hmm.
You don't think that B is implied by
I
that?
would like to leave it the way it is and then talk to Ray and come back with a substitute, if it's okay, but leave. Okay.
As I understand, the amendment being offered is to remove the strikeout of section B
Right.
only.
Right,
Okay.
understand it.
Is there further discussion on the amendment only? All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ordinance 5106 has been amended.
And so I guess that's a testimony to how much we need Debbie here. No more grandchildren, Debbie, not on Monday night. All right. 05106 was proposed to my committee during the last parts of 2005. And it simply reflects the more complex environment in which we live, in which we operate, where 75% of the units are rental property at this point in time, or somewhere around there. And in the olden days, we had a much simpler little operation, and it was possible to do all kinds of little special favors and so on and so forth, which is what this was. It's not the initial thing that we struck out is not part of state code at all. But we have, under the recommendation of the Assistant Safety Service Director, moved to making the property owner, who is already responsible under state law, responsible, not being able to subcontract that with us doing the activities. If they want to do it on their own and collect the money, that's A-okay with us. But we don't want to have it happening in the utilities billing office. One of our big problems is we have a stupendous amount of operational activity in June and August. That's during the time in the year when we have a lot of repairs going on in the city and excessive amounts of business associated with the old way of doing things. And I think that since we do have now a really landlord business proposition going on, and I think that the chamber even talks about that, this is just maybe part of the business operations. That's what I would suggest or think is going on. Anyway, that's the proposal in 05106, to have the existing state law dominate and eliminate that old way of doing business where we could sign a paper and put someone else in charge of the bills, although we were never not responsible, we being not me and the rest of the landlords, since I'm a landlord.
Other comments? Not that. No other comments on ordinance 5106? Anyone from the audience wishing to speak to this?
I just have a question.
Diane, we'll ask that you come to the microphone. State your name, address, or affiliation if you would.
Diane McVeigh, 83 Grosvenor. I just wanted maybe some clarification in terms of, I think the landlords have always been responsible for the water bills anyway. and I think that is fine. This doesn't seem to cause any problem. I just want to be assured that the water meters will be read every month so that you actually have something that you can use, you know, when you're changing tenants, to know this was what the bill was here, you know, was it an estimated amount for whatever, and is that something that city, you know, the billing office will be doing, especially at those critical times of the year.
Your point is very well taken.
I will check on it, but my understanding is we don't estimate.
That they do at times, but
Yeah, okay, I can ask, that time of year, I will ask Ray about that. Yeah.
Thanks, Diane. Member Patterson.
I don't know that it wouldn't be part of the ordinance anyway, but is there a system where if you want the meter read, even if it's in your own name, you can call in and say, okay, on this month, because some people do move in and out at different times other than the June, September.
Yeah, the other thing that we probably needed to do, and I think once again, it's testimony to Debbie, the lack of Debbie. For lack of Debbie, I forgot to put its starting date of 1st September. Because it won't be this year, it'll take effect, it'll be the following year.
It's there.
Is it there?
Section one.
Even when she's not there, she's way ahead of me. I can't believe it. Okay.
Other comments? Ordinance 5206, an ordinance vacating a 10-foot alley to the abutting property owner on Columbia Avenue. Member Bain.
Mr. President, I talked about this last week and requested a faith statement from my colleagues on council, but the information is on the next two pages. There's a property owner at 59 Columbia whose property sits on a plat that was made in 1900 by the village of Athens. And the alley runs right through the house that was never moved. I guess the person who platted it had ideas that never came to fruition. But the person who owns it, if you turn to that plat, has all three lots. And so I asked Gary what to do, and he said he thought a good solution would be to say, there are no utility lines in this. All three of the units of the parcels have to be in the same, put together in one lot. I believe it says that in the ordinance. That said vacation to property owners will be effective upon verification from the Athens County Recorder's Office that said property owner has combined the three tracts of lands into a single plot parcel. Simply vacating the parcel, even though the right-of-way, even though it never was developed and was 105 years ago, as you can see, would create a landlocked parcel that might in the future create difficulties for us. That would be the one that's 247.71 deed number. So that's why we're doing it this way. Okay? All right, so, and then the warranty deed is up there. And so Henry Bosca's action will be remanded by this, I guess. No, somebody earlier.
Sorry. you
Other
said-
comments?
Oh, I just have a question.
Member Bishop.
When you said that that would make a landlocked parcel, and it might cause a problem in the future, could you explain that a little?
Well, I'm not sure I can, but what would happen is there's no access to it because
Right.
it's up on the top of the ridge.
I see that, yeah.
And there's no alleyway. And this is the ridge, and then it goes down precipitously to Columbus Road.
Right.
So Jenkins, technically, you can't transfer landlocked property. So if you remove the alley, it's landlocked lot, it would not be transferable.
They could never sell it, is that what you're saying?
So by combining it all into one large lot, is a parcel that fronts into street.
So the idea is we're requiring them to put all three parcels in one lump. If
So-
we're going to
so
vacate
they're-
the island.
Including the vacated alley.
Included the vacated alley.
Okay, so then that would not be a landlocked,
No, that's
No,
not.
it would be
Yes,
part of
one
one
big lot.
large lot. Okay.
And thank you all for allowing me to put this up. It's a big
Other
commission.
comments? Ordinance 5306, an ordinance amending ordinance O-13403, fringe benefits package for non-union personnel within the city of Athens. Member Sands.
Mr. President, as we talked about this proposal in committee last week, this is a benefit that we would like to add to the contract we have with the non-union personnel in the city. This is, we would call it the wage continuation due to injury leave package. This allows members who are injured on the job, allows the city to pay the continuation of their salary rather than have them placed on workers' compensation funds. The workers' compensation funds create a continuing cost to the city. The workers would actually receive their full salary rather than a portion of their salary which they would receive on workers' compensation. And they would be able to use this leave for such things as continuing doctor's visits or continuing therapy after they return to work, something that is not able to happen with workers' compensation. This ordinance spells out a lot of the details with regards to limits for this benefit.
That's right.
Member Bishop.
So is this a more generous kind of policy for this kind of thing, or less? I'm just
We
curious.
believe it's more generous.
More generous, so that the workers are provided more benefit under this.
Yes.
Are there other comments? Paul?
So this is for a max of, what are we talking about, 12 weeks? Is that what
12
she-
weeks. It's
Okay.
400.
And then at that point, they'd have to go to workers' comp?
Yes.
Okay.
And the benefits are actually computed in hour segments, so 12 weeks is equivalent to 480 hours.
I saw
That's the number that's quoted in your
Okay.
Are there any other comments? Ordinance 5406, an ordinance amending the 2006 appropriation ordinance. Member Sands.
Mr. President, I move that we consider ordinance 5406 under suspension of the rules.
Second.
This ordinance has three parts to it, three appropriations of money. One of them is a reimbursement of some funds to the state, and the deadline for that is it's May 17th, I believe. May 7th, excuse me. No wonder we're suspended.
Have an emergency clause?
Doesn't need it.
It doesn't need it, yeah. Further comments on suspension of the rules only. All those in favor of suspending the rules on ordinance 5406?
Aye.
Those opposed? The rules have been suspended.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance 5406.
Second.
Again, there are three actions being proposed by this ordinance. One is appropriation of the sum of $29,000 to the water fund. This is to rework a softener bed at the water treatment plant. The mayor discussed this at a recent committee meeting. The water treatment plant is always undergoing continual attention, routine maintenance to all parts of it. Second part is $7,100 and some cents to reimburse the state of Ohio for some drug court funds that were actually drawn down from the grant in calendar year 2005, but then were not utilized for activities, and so we need to pay that money back, and that's the deadline of May 7th. The last appropriation is $4,371 and some odd cents to the CDBG funds. From these CDBG funds, the city had borrowed some money to pay some real estate taxes that were due on some houses that we own. We own two houses on Blackburn Road and one on Central Avenue that are managed for us by the Metropolitan Housing Authority. And on those, we have to pay taxes.
Further comment on ordinance 54? All those in favor of adoption of the ordinance?
Aye.
Those opposed, the ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 5506, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to purchase 2 trucks for the street department. Member Flowers.
Mr. President and council members, this is an ordinance authorizing, so it says, the Safety Service Director to purchase 2 new trucks. Last week at committee meeting, I passed out the justification report that I received from Ron Lucas on the reasoning for each of these trucks. And as he states in the first sentence, they're beginning to experience driving difficulties, and the vehicles are becoming high maintenance and in some cases dangerous. So it's important that we replace these vehicles. So that is what this ordinance is about, and important that we push it through.
Further comments? Member Weil.
During the street tour, we had a chance to look at these trucks and see how rusty they were. So they were a little obvious and show us the trucks. They're in fairly poor shape.
Other comments? Ordinance 5606, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract for street paving, curbs and sidewalks on Union Street between Schaefer and Jefferson. Project number 224. Member Flowers.
Mr. President, this is an ordinance to allow the Safety Director to bid the paving of Union Street as an alternate to the paving of High Street. And I don't know if everybody got a copy of the estimates, of which I can make a copy for everybody, but the idea is to bid this as an alternate to the High Street paving. And the bids on that are going to be opening May 11th.
Other comments? Member Weil.
The bids for the
For the High Street paving will be opening on May 11th.
Ordinance 5706, an ordinance closing portions of Court Street and Washington Street on Saturday, June 24th, and Friday, July 28th, and August 18th, 2006, for a cruise-in. Member Flowers.
Mr. President, this ordinance is to close the streets, as it says, for the cruise-in events, from what I understand, are an annual event.
Comments? Ordinance 5806, an ordinance authorizing improvements at the water treatment plant, project number 225. Member Bain.
Well, Mr. President, fellow council members, this did not go through the committee, but we've heard about it before, at least those of us who are around. Last year, we have the CDBG fund with $92,000 ready to spend, and it's going to be for improvements of the water treatment plant. And I believe that they're already advertising for bids, right?
We've already opened it, and I noticed that we didn't have an ordinance, so I thought.
Okay. Well, it'd be nice to have that. Well, then maybe we'll go back and suspend then on this, since we've already looked at it a lot of different ways. Okay, so do you have something?
I was just wondering what improvements.
We'll ask in a minute. First, let's
Ask
suspend.
in a minute. Oh, sorry.
I
right,
had a
Mr.
motion to suspend. Do we have a second? Motion and a second.
We have,
Comments on suspension
we
only.
have bids in place, and we need
open.
and we have money in
Oh,
line.
boy, that's correct.
Before
I-
suspended.
That's what we've just been told, if you want to take care of business.
Okay,
I've been informed by law director and parliamentarian
okay.
Gary
So I
Hunter.
withdraw. Paul, do you withdraw?
on whole withdrawals.
I do.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. President, I'd like to move to amend 5806 to add an emergency clause in section 3 that properly working water treatment plant is essential to the public health and safety of citizens of Athens.
Motion and a second to add an emergency clause to ordinance 5806. Is there further discussion? All those in favor of the emergency clause?
Aye.
Those opposed? There's the
Mr. President.
ordinance has been amended and read for the first time.
Mr. President, I'd like to move to consider 5806 under suspension of the rules. We've already discussed the fact that we have the money in the line and the project bid. We've heard about it before with the CDBG discussions early on, so the time is now.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules on ordinance 5806. Further discussion on suspension only. All those in favor of suspending the rules?
Aye.
Those opposed? The rules have been suspended.
Mr. President, move adoption of 5806.
Second.
Now I'm going to ask the mayor to recount for us what the improvements are. It could be anything.
Right.
There's a lot, it's an ongoing maintenance situation, as you said.
Now, these are our improvements. Last year, we had 2 inspections at our request of the water treatment plant. One was done by the Public Employees Risk Reduction Program, and that was to point out areas of worker safety, such as handrails not being around one of the filtering beds, etc. Also, different safety precautions in the well areas around them. We also followed that up with an inspection by workers' compensation for, again, looking for safety issues. So a blending of those 2 resulted in about I want to say $15,000-$20,000 worth of improvements that they wanted to do. We're using 91,000 or 90,200 or so of CDBG and the balance of water capital that was budgeted for in the 2006 budget. But they're all safety items to enhance worker safety.
Other comments? Paul?
Just for interest sake, could you get a list of those, just to know what the report, just to see what the laundry list looks like?
I remember the rails.
So I'm
Okay.
sorry. If I
Member
may
Bishop.
say then, this ordinance authorizing improvements, well, I guess it is at the plant. I guess they're,
The wells are considered a part of the
Safety.
plant.
well, I was just thinking, it's more safety
It's all safety.
issues than to the actual treatment of the water. There's nothing in here for water treatment, right? It's all
No.
safety?
It's all safety of workers.
Okay. Okay.
Other comments? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 5806?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. We are now at announcements and other business. Member Bain.
I would like to schedule a meeting for Carol for Halloween from City Services, and then I'd like to have my City Services in 2 weeks, my regular meeting. But Carol's on my committee, and she's doing Halloween this time next week.
The City Services. Carol, I believe
Yes.
you're making a nomination.
First of all, I have nominations that have been recommended by the mayor for reappointment to the Recreation Advisory Board, and that's for David Palmer, Paul Grippa, Joan Kappas, and James Sillery. And they, 2 are residents of the city and 2 are not. And these would be effective until March 31st, 2008.
We have a motion.
Are all those city appointments or are those school board appointments?
Well, Paul Grippa's a school board appointment.
Well, they
correct?
were school board appointed. I thought that the ordinance that changed and added 2 members, and that's why we restaggered the terms, did away with the appointments by the school board and just said we would could appoint up to 2 residents of the school district, but not necessarily residents of the city. That was because we made these original appointments in 2004. They're 2-year appointments.
I don't remember. I just know one time, president of the school board appointment and president of the city appointment.
Right.
It used to be a 5-member, now it's a 7-member board.
Well, it used to be a joint district, it's not.
Right, but it's,
Any problem?
Well, I don't know without. Go ahead and appoint him.
And then we'll pick them all.
No?
Yes.
I was just
Member
wondering
Bain.
if we could have the names of the other 3 members that have a different term. Who are for the 7?
Greg Oberlin, Linda Lavelle, and Linda Phillips.
Okay. That's geographical balance then.
Right, I tried to get some geography.
So I move, do we need a formal
That's
vote?
generally how
Yes,
we
I move
motion.
for adoption of these Recreation Board members.
Second.
Motion and second. Further comments? All those in favor of the appointments?
Aye.
Those opposed? The appointments have been made. Member Bishop.
Okay, I have an appointment to the Community Relations Commission, Mickey Hart. And the Community Relations Commission is becoming more active. Actually, they did participate in Beautification Day, and they did some work on West Side Cemetery. and got a donation from Down to Earth Nursery of plants and flowers to plant there. So I hope we hear a report on Beautification Day too at some point. But anyway, so the Community Relations Commission is becoming more active, looking at its really purpose and mission and new programming. And Mickey Hart, the group would like to put him forward, and he has a letter of application to the Community Relations Commission.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further comments? All those in favor of the appointment?
Aye.
Those opposed? The appointment has been made. Let's see, other announcements and other business? Member Wild.
Committee meeting?
Sure.
Environment?
Okay.
Next week, we had to postpone our conversation with council last week, but we will be holding it next Monday night at 6. And the topic is city communication, city agency communication. So people who are really, we're inviting people to say, what would you like to know about city issues, city business, communication by the city departments, what would they like to see? And so we're open to all suggestions, whether that, might translate into additional information on the website, or looking at what people really want to know and helping to provide access to that information. For example, if I may say, Paul just said that during Beautification Day, somebody mentioned the possibility of having a kiosk or something where things could be posted. So open discussion facilitated by John Schmeeding of the Athens Area Mediation Service. And so we invite people who are interested in city communication or learning more about activities of the city to come next Monday at 6, Mayor's Conference Room downstairs. And I'll have a committee meeting after.
Member Phillips.
I will probably need a planning and development committee meeting. Right now, we'll just say miscellaneous, but I think we'll have some things.
Forthcoming member Sands.
Finance and personnel, certainly some miscellaneous, if nothing else. We'll probably have April reports from the auditor's office, just to remind members.
Marathon meeting night, Member Flowers.
Well,
I'm sorry, I did not see your hand up.
Transportation committee meeting for sidewalks and street closings.
Okay, and Member Patterson.
An Arts and Recreation Committee to bring forward ordinances, or an ordinance at least, concerning Stroud's Run. Also, I wanted to make announcements. The art market is this Sunday, on Sunday, May 7th, from 12 to 3, and that's in the street in front of Baker Center. The Transportation Task Force meets in this room at 9:30 a.m. on Thursday with the consultant to suggest new routes for the transportation program. And maybe that's all. Yes.
Any other items under announcements and other business? No. Yes, tomorrow at 11:45 at Stevens Restaurant, council will be having lunch with the president of the university, Dr. McDavis. This was at the initiation of a couple of council members who thought that after Dr. McDavis had us to lunch 2 or 3 times, that it was only proper that we return the invitation, and we have. So tomorrow, 11:45, Stevens Restaurant. Opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services that have not been covered on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone wishing to speak before council tonight? See, Paul. Okay.
Don't forget to vote.
And don't forget to vote. Tomorrow's election day. Seeing no one wishing to speak before council, and having addressed all items on our agenda, we stand adjourned.